Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining the Engaging Technology to Support Vision Health and Quality of Life session today. My name is Paul Chan, and I will be moderating this session. I would like to introduce our presenters for the session, Dr. Ranya Habash and Dr. Kyle Keane. Dr. Habash is the CEO of Lifelong Vision Special Purpose Acquisition Company and the former Medical Director of Technology Innovation at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute. Dr. Keane is a lecturer and research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and executive director of With Participation Incorporated. Today, Dr. Habash will discuss how new technological advancements in vision and eye health can lead to improvements in the diagnosis and treatment of eye disease. And Dr. Keane will speak about how new technological advancements can improve accessibility for those with vision impairment. Before we start our session, I just want to provide a quick reminder to everyone that you can submit questions through the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. We will respond to as many questions as time allows at the end of the session. And at this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Habash. Ranya?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Dr. Chan. Really appreciate the introduction. And hi, everybody. Today, we're going to go through iconic approaches to eye health. So we'll start with my presentation, and then we'll move over to Dr. Keene's. So let me get started here. Okay, so this talk is all about engaging technology in order to support vision health and the quality of life. So we're going to go into some of the really innovative new ways to tackle this kind of an issue. We know that patients anywhere, this is what we all think, that patients anywhere in the world should really have access to care pretty much on a daily basis through any mobile device. And it is a possibility because we want to improve eye health for all. And digital technology is really the way to do this. I mean, this is how we can make healthcare faster, simpler, and easier for our patients. So what are some of the reasons we want to do this? You know, a lot of us on this presentation know this, but it's always good to put this up as a reminder. Globally, we know that 2.2 billion people in the world are visually impaired. But the really interesting thing here and the real rub is that half of them we could have saved with early screening, detection, and treatment. And these are things that we can achieve with any mobile device in a lot of cases. This is digital technology. But that's the issue, is that when half of these people could have been saved or their vision could have been saved at a much earlier stage, I mean, we're doing the world a huge service if we can arm them with all of these technologies. Now, on the flip side, patients are also consumers these days, and we know that they have a big growing demand, and we have to adapt to that. We'll never have enough eye care professionals to help this growing population of patients who need care. And so digital is really our key to helping meet that kind of demand in the global eye care market. The financial impact is very clear here. We know that also, this is according to the World Health Organization's 2020 statistics, that the economic burden of visual impairment, and that means people who can't work or can't drive a car or can't hold down a job, can't learn well in college or in school, or people who are caring for these patients. We know that that kind of economic burden of impact is $410 billion for the world per year. That's per year. That's dollars spent or time spent or with the economic impact of these issues. And in the US alone, that burden is $139 billion per year. So we know this is a major problem. This is something that we need to fix, and we have the tools with which to do so. I think this part is probably the most exciting for me. I mean, we know that a lot of times the same exact solution fixes both extremes of the problems, right? It fixes these or helps these patients in sub-Saharan Africa who don't have care, but it also helps young professionals on this call who just haven't had an eye exam in a while or haven't been able to get to the doctor in a while just because we're so busy all the time. And that's really the best part of all this, is that digital really equalizes that kind of access to care. I know this because when I founded my first company, which was a telehealth company, I did that because I'm from rural West Virginia, and there a lot of our patients really can't get great care unless they have, government vouchers and travel vouchers and food stamps and all these other things. And so it's really hard, even for a mother, to take her, baby with respiratory distress into the ER. But with something like a video call, that patient can have an assessment instantly and know whether or not to take those steps to go into the emergency room. And so that was actually the impetus behind my first company. But by the same token, I also used it in my private practice in Boca Raton, Florida, where I had all of these, CEOs of companies who were my patients, and they wanted access to me 24/7 because they're traveling everywhere. But again, it was the same exact technology that solved both extremes of that problem. And I think, again, that is that's why that's why I have so much passion for digital health, because digital health is that equalizer. It's that bridge between those two populations, and it's right here at our fingertips. Okay, so it's not that far-fetched to think of digital eye care, right? Because a lot of our digital interactions are taking a much greater role. They're becoming a much more intimate aspect of our daily lives. I mean, we already do online gaming, working, learning, shopping. We do online banking, and we even do online dating. We can do online dating. We can certainly do online eye care as well, right? And we know that a lot of the other medical fields have a lot of digital innovation. I mean, for years, my dad has been checking his own EKG on his, Apple Watch, and using all these digital tools. But we don't have that really well in eye care. I mean, we have things like tracking our sleep and our steps and our behavior, our meditation apps and that sort of thing, but we don't really have good eye care technology when it comes to this. So we want to drive this whole new consumer movement from patient to consumer behavior in eye care as well. We want patients to want to check their eyes, and screen themselves for the different diseases. It shouldn't be oh no, I have to go to the eye doctor's office now. It has to be, oh, I want to use this app to screen myself for something that I have in my family. So we want to treat our patients as consumers these days. And I think that's a really big understanding that us as eye care professionals need to have for our patients. We want to enable all of these effective in-home solutions for patients. And, all of this leads to earlier detection and better quality of life. Because as we saw, about 50% of those 2.2 billion patients with visual impairment, we could have saved with early screening, detection, and treatment. So when we think of, the lifelong stages of eye care, let's start with kids, right? And I was one of these kids, so I can tell you firsthand. But we know that poor vision affects a lot of kids in the world, about 30% of kids, and this leads to poor school performance, social development, and long-term development as well. I mean, I'm a -8 myope, meaning that if I didn't have my contacts in or my glasses, I'd get hit by a truck if I walked outside. But I can do everything in the world up here. The thing is, when I was a kid growing up in rural West Virginia, I mean, it was relatively harder to get eye care. And when I got my glasses or contacts at age about 8, I mean, it really changed my whole life. I had trouble going outside to play kickball with the kids. Before that, I couldn't see the ball, couldn't read the board very well at school. I mean, there were things that really would have changed my life dramatically had I not had something as simple as a pair of glasses or contacts. And this is where I am now. And it's really because of that. So, we have 30% of kids in the world who don't get access to that. And that is one of the things that we want to enable as fast as possible. Now, this all leads into the development of kids as adults, right? And we know that patients who are in the presbyopic ages or patients who are highly functional in their professional years also need really good vision care. So if they haven't had good eye care or had something as simple as glasses and contacts when they were kids, how are they supposed to learn in school, drive a car, hold down a job, etc.? And now we're going back to all of those factors that feed into that economic burden of eye care that we talked about earlier. But nowadays we have things like presbyopic eye drops that will help increase, productivity in the workplace, for instance, for patients who are over age 45 or so. And then going into the older ages, we also know that the leading cause of things like car accidents and hip fractures, and actually cognitive decline, that's really become a hot button topic these days. Vision and cognitive decline. The worse the vision is, the quicker the visual, or the quicker the cognitive decline, and the propensity for things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and other cognitive defects. Those are directly related. And something as simple as cataract surgery, which takes me about 6 minutes to do. I mean, that's my bread and butter cataract. That's my bread and butter surgery, could change the life of someone as long as it's been detected and they have that access to care. Okay, so moving on. The other thing that we can't forget here is that every condition affects more than just the patient, right? It affects their caregivers as well. So, excuse me, 1 second. Okay. So a lot of the causes around the world, as we said, of blindness are treatable or preventable. And these are 3 prime examples, okay? So if we go here to the macular degeneration bucket, a lot of people on this presentation already know this, but with macular degeneration, we know that this, may start occurring around age 50 or so. But it keeps developing until one day there's a blood vessel that breaks through that retina and leaks and bleeds. And lo and behold, that's what grandma sees then, that big blind spot over her grandchildren, okay? We could have saved it that whole time as it was brewing for years before that, had we had early screening and detection tools, which we do with digital technology. That's the kind of education I'm trying to impart here. Glaucoma is another one. This is what happens in glaucoma. So it's a silent disease. These are silent diseases. These are things that don't hurt. People don't know they have them until they go see Dr. Chan or I, and we diagnose them with this. But oftentimes it's already too late. Glaucoma starts to take away the nerve fibers. It starts to put compression on the nerve fibers, which then takes away the vision from the outside and works its way inward. So they get a decreasing field of vision over time. And again, this creeps up on them. So oftentimes we get patients who come to the office and they say, "Doc, I got into a car accident because I couldn't see the car in my blind spot. Can you check my glasses?" Well, it's not the glasses. We end up finding out that they have pretty advanced glaucoma, and that's why they couldn't see the car in their blind spot. But they had no idea until they finally came to see me. And so this is, again, these are things that we can treat, we can detect and then treat early if patients are given the tools to do so. And then another really exciting part of this is another one of my passion projects here. Vision is actually much more than just meets the eye. Because with vision, we can actually unlock other parts of the body too. We've known forever that we can detect things like diabetic retinopathy in the retina, right? But aside from that, did you know that we can also detect things like autism or Alzheimer's? Let me use Alzheimer's as an example. So Alzheimer's, we know that some of the drugs that are out now for treatment of Alzheimer's, they have to be given at the very first sign of cognitive decline. They have to be given at the very first sign of Alzheimer's. Well, where is the first sign of Alzheimer's? It's actually in the eye. That's where we see it first. We see the eye movements decrease in speed first. We see biomarkers a lot of times in the tear film, and we definitely see thinning in the retina as well. And so that's the crazy part, is that, all of these things occur in the eye first. It really is the signal for all of these other things. So now imagine being able to pick up these things years before they're picked up in the brain or from cognitive decline, but we're able to find them and then have a patient take steps towards treating them earlier so that they don't become a major problem for them later on. Things like COVID are another one. We're validating a technology at Bascom where we can actually take a picture of the eye and detect COVID with the same accuracy as a rapid antigen test. Heart disease is another one. Oxygen saturation levels, O2 saturation. I mean, I could give you a demo right now of how you take a picture of the eye and it'll tell you what your O2 level is. My own dad struggles with this, the pulse ox on his finger, it doesn't read half the time, but with this technology, instead, taking a picture of the eye and the blood vessels on the conjunctiva, we can tell things like this, what the blood pressure of the patient is, what their oxygen level is, what their heart rate or respiratory rate is. I mean, these are amazing things that we can do with the eye. These are all digital technologies. Most of them don't even require any sort of devices. This is all what we call a SaaS-based technology, where it's just with an internet connection that we can do it. And then all the rest of these as well. So diabetes, stroke, traumatic brain injury, migraine, and any other form of dementia as well. Okay, so what kinds of technology solutions are there? We like to focus, we want to focus on things like telehealth, IoT, which is the Internet of Things. That just means that there's a device that has a detection mechanism. It sends off an alert to somebody who needs to know, like the doctor, for instance, if a certain threshold is met. Data analytics, remote patient monitoring, that's a way to give patients tools to monitor their, let's say macular degeneration or intraocular pressure or something like that over time from their own homes. Tools for patient education or patient engagement, and then decentralized clinical trials, which I feel very strongly about. I mean, our clinical trials right now, they just rely on patients who come to the healthcare system in order to join a trial. Well, we know that there's a lot more of the population who would benefit from these trials who can't make it in physically, right? But now with digital technology, we can do things like clinical trials enrollment tools, or following them on a daily basis with remote patient monitoring tools to see how they're responding to the medications or the treatments that we give. And because we're increasing that population for our decentralized clinical trials, we're getting much more robust data, because we're getting data from every corner of the globe, from every sort of geographic and economic or socioeconomic, racial background, and that's making our digital technology much better because it enriches our algorithms and makes them stronger. And then the whole system aggregates this data in the process so that we're able to get secondary and tertiary data insight from all of these different data streams coming in. So I know that's getting a little bit complicated now, but I wanted to give you a feel for the power of digital technology solutions. I mean, this is a way we can help our patients, but we can also help all our partners and the industry in the process as well with all of this data insight. And another way that we can do this actually is by using partners. And I think this is, a very exciting part of it. This is an overlooked part of things where we can use partners like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, for instance, because they also want tools to make their own customers successful. So if we can make them successful and their customers are successful, then the whole system just benefits from it. When our partners win, we all win. And then, every part of this eye care system really does benefit from this type of structure. That's why I was making a point of that it's not just giving our patients the tools. Our patients ultimately win. They're, to me, the most important part of all of this. They're at the center of all of this. But I think what's really important to know is that we also have to enrich our partners as well. Partners in the pharmaceutical industry, the technology industry, big tech, industry partners, retail partners, payers, employers. I mean, all of us need to be working together, surrounding our patients so that we can give a better healthcare experience in general. And the whole goal, the whole name of the game here is to reach patients before they even know they're patients, right? Early screening, detection, and treatment. So thank you, Prevent Blindness, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share the power of digital technologies that we can offer to the world. And I'll pass it over to Dr. Keane now. Dr. Keane, if you'd like to share your screen, you can take over.
Right. I am working on it. Thank you, participants, for having patience. I have a visual impairment, and I am not adapting to technology as fast as I wish I was. So it sometimes takes me a while to click all the little buttons to make the things happen. Can I get a confirmation that I clicked the buttons? Yeah.
Got it.
Woo! All right. So small victories sometimes matter. Okay. I use inverted colors. I'm sorry if these colors are jarring to some people's eyes. With my visual impairment, it makes things significantly easier when I use inverted colors. And I'm going to try to present. You can probably see that none of the words in my menus are fully visible. So like this, you should say slideshow, but it's covered up because I changed the fonts a little bit and it broke everything on my computer. I'm talking from a bit of a different perspective. I have tons of respect for what Dr. Habash does. And it's such a fundamentally necessary part of the system to address, which is how do we capture that 50% of people who have simply treatable eye conditions if we diagnose it early enough. I tend to work on the other side of that equation, which is people who didn't get diagnosed, didn't get the preventative medicine, didn't get the early intervention. And I look at especially technological ways to address some of those life issues, although systemic and social ways are what I'm becoming increasingly obsessed with. And now I'll give you some context about myself. Hopefully I'm being entertaining. I've become very nervous presenting of late, but there's my inverted face. I'm sure that it's a little bit jarring. I haven't been able to fix that yet, but I am a lecturer and a research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. I have been teaching a class there since 2015 with an amazing teaching team that has students in small teams work together with a local community member who has some type of a disability. Many of those are visual, other disabilities also work out great. And the students work on a technological solution to some particular life activity in some particular context that's being interrupted by some small workflow issue. And all of these innovations that we do technologically, I have been trying to set up different business models for the last 7 years to try to support these innovations as they move out into the ecosystem. Some products have a big enough market that they can financially self-sustain. Dr. Habash's, company and financial models make a lot of sense when you're targeting a huge population, and we can do a giant portfolio intervention where we can diagnose a bunch of different conditions using one simple camera on a mobile phone. That's an amazing thing. I'm super happy it scales. I believe in it. It makes a lot of sense. I tend to work on the really, really fringe end of the rope where everything has gone awry and individuals are highly diverse and needing different types of interventions. One of the ways to bring those innovations out to the world that I've been exploring is this open collaborative ecosystem for holistic grassroots AT innovation. And I always use way too many big words to confuse everyone just because I can't not think about things on a really big level. So I'm going to talk about the words because it really is fundamentally important, which is not all businesses can be supported by traditional business models. Some things, if we cooperate and we collaborate, we can end up building ecosystems that sustain stuff in unexpected ways. So I've been traveling around internationally trying to set up grassroots assistive technology innovation programs and trying to build support systems, social support systems to help people with disabilities discover mentors and find life experiences that they might not have even known were possible. So I'm trying to do systems level intervention way on the other side. We miss the diagnosis, but we know how to integrate people if we can figure out the systems to sustain it. So that's a little bit about me. Hopefully that's not too boring. I find myself mildly interesting, which is why this presentation is all about me. So my strange career path. At age 2, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. It is a degenerative retinal condition that goes in the opposite direction of macular degeneration. My peripheral and my night vision start to diminish very early in life, and then it progressively gets worse. When I was diagnosed, they couldn't tell me when I would go blind, but they said you'll very, very likely go blind and you'll definitely experience some life activity interruptions due to the visual impairment. Part of what I want to talk about here is give a bit of a patient story. I am sort of a patient. I'm somebody living with a visual impairment, but also how do I think that I have ways to interrupt that system in a way that can end up helping myself and people like me. So some of the life activities that started to drop away. At age 15, I was driving, I was in band, I was in drumline, I was a very coordinated athletic person doing a lot of things. And it's not that I'm not now, but those particular activities were very visual in nature. So at age 16, I couldn't do night driving anymore. The night vision had gone away and I started to lose a life activity. I'm not sure that that was something that a medical, technological, or social intervention could have helped with, although self-driving cars maybe could be said that they would help out with that. but still the independent sense of driving in the context of a culture that's very car driven. Yeah, sorry, it's very car centric. It's very driven by cars and driving in Southern California where I grew up. It was a big hit to my life trajectory and the narrative of who I was. So age 17, my peripheral vision started to go away, and I was having trouble coordinating in this athletic activity of a marching band. So I needed other people to start paying attention to me visually rather than me paying attention to them. By age 18, end of high school, I was no longer driving. So I had a little blip of a full high school experience before night driving started falling away. Some of my social activities that I really liked, driving altogether, started to fall away. From age 19 to 23, I was an undergrad studying physics. So I was doing experimental physics, and I was doing a lot of machining of steel parts, and started to do a little bit of computational science stuff. I ended up going on to do a PhD in physics, but I had to drop the machine shop part because it became dangerous. Then I moved into computational work, not because my heart wasn't in the experimental stuff, but just because I couldn't safely run the machines to make the devices, and I couldn't see the wires and components to build the electronics that I wanted to build. So I moved into computational work. And then I went and worked as a software engineer for a while, and I've been working at MIT teaching computational science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the assistive technology class. I think that, I know not everybody wants to hear everyone's big history, but there is something that I think these stories can help illustrate about the other side of the story. You know, the statistics are all about these individuals. And of course, I can't tell you every one of those 1.1 billion individuals who maybe couldn't have been treated through early intervention, but I can at least tell my story and hope that some people get some inspiration to move towards bigger systems to support stuff. So I'll go a bit more quickly about my covert career in assistive technology. So I was a physicist, I was an academic, I've been a lecturer in a lot of traditional things, but in parallel, at age 2, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. Then I was going to the summer camp run by the Junior Blind of America. The Foundation for the Junior Blind is what they used to be called, Camp Bloomfield, and a program called Visions that would take families with people who have disabilities out to do activities like whitewater rafting and going to Disneyland and SeaWorld and going to amusement parks, going to the beach, just to experience life. And Camp Bloomfield was a summer camp where I could just be left alone with other visually impaired kids so that I could develop socially inside of a context that didn't make me feel like another. So some of these social interventions, huge systemic social interventions, had some of the biggest impacts on my life. Not many people realize that the reason that I'm doing technology and assistive technology is because at age 7, I was hanging out with my kid friends who happened to use assistive tech and were already brilliant technologists. They could explain to me some of the technical details about devices that were well beyond most of our understanding of some of these devices because they relied on them. I gained a deep appreciation for the personal stories of so many young individuals who relied on technology. In undergrad, I constantly had to advocate for myself and work inside of the Disability Services Center and try to help them figure out how to help me do physics. Physics has a lot of two-dimensional math and Greek symbols, things that the people who were reading inside of the Disability Services Office couldn't read. So I was starting to face systemic failures of some of the things that we had put in place to try to help me achieve the goals that I wanted. So I've always been just riding up against that frictionful edge of what the accommodations that we think we're providing and the reality of how much support they're actually giving me and how much I'm having to drive those systems. So similarly, in my PhD, I became really obsessed with computational work, and I wanted to understand what physicists do. This is in my application to grad school. I said, I want to know what a physicist does so I can figure out how to do it when I'm blind. Because right now, from everyone I'm talking to, they're telling me that it's going to be really, really different from what I expect and what other people do. So I wanted to figure out that path for myself, and I worked very hard to do it. And now I teach my assistive tech class, and I run a bunch of international programs that have individuals with disabilities engaging with engineering students and working professionals to try to scope out life challenges and propose certain technological interventions in equal participation in life. All right, I am going well on time, I hope. I will wrap up in the next few minutes in case I'm causing any time stress. But what I wanted to say, I said two-dimensional formatted information. So an example is a bar chart or histogram on the left, where we're laying out the various heights of these different values visually so that we can see that one thing looks much bigger than the other thing. In mathematics, many of you, even if you're not mathematicians, may have taken an algebra or arithmetic class and seen the quadratic equation or geometry, depending where you end up seeing it. And it's this fractional thing with a plus or minus and a square root. And this is two-dimensional. It looks like a picture, not just a string of characters or text or anything like that. And then music is also a two-dimensionally formatted information exchange. I became really obsessed with the dimensionality of information exchange and how do we start to hack that to convey that type of information in such a compact and compatible way with other people. I won't talk too much about this, but I did a lot of research on interventions inside of physics classes where they do and do not have interactive graphics. So we really do believe that we can encode spatial information through these interactive graphics that somebody can come and turn a little knob, see what's happening on the screen and encode that information inside of themselves. And I want to understand, are there ways to encode that information, that spatial information in some way that's not visual? These are really big, complicated questions, but I really find them fascinating. I think we can figure them out if we work together. I'm going to skip a bit over some of these things. So if you think about how computers can communicate, they have text and they have sound. Sound could be speech, or it could just be sound like music, like sonification. And then there's some level of touch or haptics. I became quite obsessed with encoding spatial information in the haptic domain because I find that there's some limitations to speech and sonification and textual description. Spatial information isn't conveyed well in those formats. Touch has absolute ability to interpret spatial information and encode it. So do the other senses, but it takes a lot more training. So I've been tackling a problem of how do you take an image, such as a happy face that's color, and then how do you make it into a pixelated version of a happy face such that each one of those little pixels can be raised like a pin. So over on the far right, there's a picture of a flat surface with some little pins raised. And if you touch those pins, we would like to visually say that that looks like a happy face, but it doesn't feel like a happy face because there's no context whatsoever about what a happy face should feel like in this very strange, abstract, tactile domain. We collectively, humanity, I talked to a nice man today. I got it, and for my podcast, a man who's been working in assistive technology for 40 years in Vienna, talking about haptic graphics and how it's still an unsolved problem, but we're making progress. But we need to work together. We need big collaborative systems to solve this. So I have one particular device that gives tactile information to blind people. And we've made it so that the materials are somewhere, the first version was $35. We can distribute something that can give tactile information to blind people. Technologically, we're kind of solved. We now have a really good version of it. I still think the end result is going to be less than $500 to end users. But to distribute that, if I want to get intellectual property, lawyers, insurance, distribution, import, export taxes, all of these things that I'm going to have to figure out, it becomes incredibly difficult to try to distribute this. So I'm proposing and developing with a lot of partners a global distributed system where different universities are engaging in engineering and distributing these projects to local community members so that students can learn about disabilities and inclusion, but can also learn about the engineering required to sustain interesting assistive technologies that can change lives. So I think everybody in this particular ecosystem is going to benefit from it and will be able to produce assistive technologies in a local market that can sustain and move themselves forward and serve the local communities in a way that I, as an individual across the world, might not be able to. So I won't get too much into my little pitch about the different business models, just to say that we're taking some of those shared infrastructure things, moving it into a nonprofit, an NGO that I'm running, so that we can take the intellectual development, the product design, the manufacturing, the marketing and distribution, take some of those logistics off of the small company who then needs to just worry about introducing a new technology, figuring out a little bit and then handing it over to us to try to sustain that inside of the ecosystem. I don't need to make personal money at this. I just want to see systems sustained, because I remember the kids in the summer camp who relied on that technology to experience life in a way that I never even imagined for myself, sighted or not sighted. They were wonderful and they had a blast at life, and I learned to have fun from them. So I want to get technologies to support that type of thing. Yeah, so I probably talked slightly longer than I should have, but I'm really excited and passionate and incredibly grateful to be a part of this conference. And quality of life is a really complex thing. And I wish I had a solution, but at least I'm just gonna go try to dig into the systems that involve. I'm so grateful for Dr. Habash to mention caregivers and the secondary social impacts of some of the innovations that we have. It doesn't just remove a burden from an individual, it changes the people in their life's entire dynamic, their relationship with all the people that they love and the things that they want to do, and the amount that they can support and give back to the people who they care about. That's it. Thank you for letting me talk. I am incredibly grateful to have been included, and I apologize for my my need to bounce off, so I won't be able to stay for the discussion, but I'm incredibly grateful to have been included in this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Keane, and safe travels to you.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Habash, many of the questions are addressed to you specifically. I'm not sure how much time Dr. Keane has, or maybe he has to drop off now, but one general question is around when the technology that you all discuss will be available for, I guess, just regular commercial use in daily life.
Right. I will have to drop off right now, but I will say that is the right question to ask, and ask it every time and ask it repeatedly until you can get a clear answer. I can't give you a clear answer yet. I'm working on building out systems to distribute it. I wish I could tell you when it was available, but I'm committed to making it happen.
Terrific.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job, Kyle. Yeah, so from my standpoint, I mean, a lot of these digital technologies are already, they're already there, they're already functional. Some of them are moving through the FDA process, and then it's just really a matter of distributing them to the population. But I purposely was not talking about anything that is just an idea or a concept. I mean, these are things that are here and ready to be distributed as soon as they're validated and gone through the FDA process. In fact, we can even roll them out without the FDA process as just companion apps or something like that. So, again, I just want to assure the population that this is not, just conceptual technology. I mean, it's here, and there are ways to get that out. And then, Paul, you can probably elaborate on this a little bit more too, but things like the Alzheimer's detection, right? We know that disease have been doing that for a very long time, and that technology is already here, and it's a way that we can screen patients and at least point them in the right direction that they need to be. In case you'd like to, in case you'd like to discuss that a little bit further.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of the topics around just AI and using it in different spaces. Either as an autonomous device, as disease prediction, as the eye is the window to the soul, right? So can it pick up systemic disease? But you touched on something that I think was really, really important, right? And you probably know where I'm going to go with this, which is about the data, right? And race, ethnicity, all these issues around making sure that the data is representative of a more generalizable population. And I do want you to comment on that. I mean, I think this is about as a moderator, I'm trying to sort of extract information from you. But I will say that from the Alzheimer's perspective, from many other disease states that we're looking at for disease detection within fundus photographs or OCTs and all these other things that we're looking at, it's there. I mean, we can do it, right? It's just a matter of making sure that it's validated, it's generalizable, and it's representative. So what's your position on this?
Yeah, so we have strived for a very long time to use, as much robust or rich data as we can. But this has been the impetus behind a lot of the data conglomerates that we've seen in eye care and otherwise, right? But now what we're seeing is a trend towards working together with other partners. And that's why I brought up the tech partners, for instance, because, Bascom Palmer, for instance, I led a machine learning project between Bascom Palmer and Microsoft so that we could use all the data from Bascom Palmer, but put it through Microsoft supercomputers, which is able to handle a very large volume of data, which does help to strengthen the algorithms. But that still doesn't really answer the question, which is how do you actually get patients all over the world to give their data? Well, you really can't do that unless you're giving them a digital technology to use. And that is exactly what I stand for. I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve with the SaaS-based tools that we're talking about. And again, when I say SaaS-based tools, what I mean is this is software as a service, meaning that as long as the patient has an internet connection or can go to a regional clinic that has an internet connection, then they can input their data and be enrolled in these trials and have their data assessed along with the greater population from anywhere in the world. That's how we're really going to achieve this true, heterogeneity of the data.
Great. And just going back to the discussion around the FDA process, and we all know about the CCOI and also, these discussion as software as a medical device. So it brings up a lot of different topics, in terms of we want to have these algorithms out there, for people to use. And but we also have to be clear about what we're trying to do in terms of the regulatory process to make sure that these things are safe to use. And could you just comment on that or maybe just share with the audience, what's happening in that space?
Yeah, so the FDA is working really hard to be able to put firm parameters around things like software as a medical device, right? Because some of those factors aren't as, as easy to be labeled or easy to be sort of defined as some of the other devices. But I think one thing in general to remember about any of these things, is that if you are able to go to a retail clinic, for instance, and get a fundus photo with an autonomous read that says that you may be at risk for something like macular degeneration or diabetic retinopathy, those algorithms are out there right now. They just need to be proliferated a lot more. They are out there and they are being used. That's another point that we want to make, but they need to be out, they need to be distributed a lot further. If you do get one of those things, it doesn't mean you have that disease. It just means this is a heads up. This is a yellow flag. You need to go and have it validated or confirmed by your own physician in a real medical office. This is just a helping hand to sort of get you to the right place. And I think that's the main thing that we want to remember about the regulatory process is that it's not a catch-all. It doesn't mean you have or don't have that disease. It just means this is another way to get you thinking about that and then having you be sort of funneled to the right place in order to give it the attention that it needs.
Terrific. Here's an interesting question. So, we talked about clinical trials. Okay, so now, can you comment on how this technology, so just let's say maybe AI specifically, how it can be used in clinical trials and going forward?
Yeah, so all right, let's say that there's a pharmaceutical company that has a blood pressure drug or a COVID drug. Let's go with that. Let's go with the COVID use case. Okay. So they're trying to come out with a COVID use case or a COVID drug to treat, COVID, obviously. Now we have these tools that are completely digital where a patient can just take a picture of the eye, assess, their COVID status. Now, let's say they're positive, right? So that's flagged because now they're in our system. We have their demographics, we have their family history, we have all their other things like what age they are, where they grew up, what kind of job they work, all of these other ancillary data points that all feed into the algorithm ultimately, right? But now they're given the COVID drug to treat. Now you can follow them on a remote patient monitoring basis with the other digital tools that we have, which are again, just SaaS-based, meaning that they can check their blood pressure, their COVID status, their oxygen saturation, their heart rate, respiratory rate, et cetera, all through the process. And that company is now getting consistent feedback from the patient on more of a really pretty passive level, as long as the patient does their testing every single day with the digital app. So now you've got a patient who is in the system and accessible to have their data into this larger algorithm. But at the same time, getting use from these clinical technologies, and the pharmaceutical industry also gaining insight from what the patient is doing and being able to monitor them longitudinally, which oftentimes really doesn't happen, right? So, I mean, you've got this like perfect system now where everybody is benefiting from all of this. Now, let's say you throw in other statistics from other sources too, and that's what you have. That's where you have aggregate data building, and you're able to develop or extract secondary and tertiary insight from all of those different data points coming together and representative of a larger population of people. So that's the way decentralized clinical trials should work, but especially when accompanied with these digital technologies that we can give patients to use without any devices too. That answer your question?
Yeah,
I know
no,
it sounds
I think
like
it's,
I get it.
no,
Exactly
yeah,
what I'm trying
no,
to.
it's complicated. And I think, a lot of times people think that, AI is sort of this panacea, and it's a one size fits all, but it's not, right? And I think that, depending on what you're looking at for the clinical trials, the AI or the technology will have a different role. But the COVID question came up a few times here, and people found some interest in that and sort of what you're doing with COVID.
Yep.
And can you elaborate on this and discuss, what you're looking for in these patients, and just share that?
Yeah, so some of the stuff is proprietary. I hate to use that word, but it does need to be said. But what I will say is, one of the things that we're able to do now, just with the native technology on any smartphone, I mean, honestly, it goes back to like an iPhone 6 camera, which is really amazing, actually. So we're able to look at the conjunctival vessels and the conjunctiva itself, but that's telling us a lot about the blood vessels, how much oxygenated versus deoxygenated blood there is, just based on the wavelengths of light that are coming back, the morphology of cells there. So there's a lot of stuff that we can tell just by the native, hardware and software on a mobile device right now. So that's really what it's taking a picture of. I can't really get more detailed than that, but I can tell you that it is, it is validated against all the standard technologies like pulse oximeters and regular, blood pressure monitoring and COVID testing.
Great. And I'm going to finish with one last question, which was posed earlier. Does the technology that you're describing work when dealing with a completely blind person?
Yeah, that was a good question. Yes, it does. So in the sense that, maybe you need to have some assistance to help you take the picture, for instance. But other than that, yes, absolutely. If the outside of your eye is pretty normal in appearance, for instance, then it can read the blood vessels. If the lighting situation is good enough, and there's AI in the technology too that'll tell you to go to a better lighted position or something like that, or move your head a certain way. But it'll help you if you can't really, if you do have some visual impairment. But the point is that yes, even if you're visually impaired or there's a complete blindness or anything, then absolutely we can still detect a lot of information from a fundus image or from an external image or biomarkers on front of the eye, or any of these things that we're talking about.
Great. Thank you so much, Ranya. Wonderful talk as always.